like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, it's 9:33 and this is The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, on your TV and on your radio. Now today on The Briefing, as Zelenskyy addressed Parliament, what more can the UK and the West do to repel Russia? Could the Ukrainian David actually beat Putin's Goliath? And we explore our energy security, prices for British consumers, that and a first-hand account of John Bercow's behaviour from one of his former colleagues. All that to come and more after the headlines.
A very good morning, it's 9:34. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. Residents in Kyiv have been urged to get to bomb shelters this morning as Ukrainian officials declared an air alert due to the threat of a missile attack. Well, Russian state media said troops would stop firing in the Ukrainian capital and 4 other cities to let people evacuate. The UK Ministry of Defence says Vladimir Putin's assault on the capital has failed to make major progress despite heavy shelling. Meanwhile, Ukrainian air defences have had considerable success against Russian fighter jets, preventing them from achieving to any degree of control of the air. The Ukrainian government has banned the export of certain key food supplies as it defends itself from Russia. The export then of meat, salt, sugar and various grains have all been stopped. The United States has rejected Poland's offer to hand over fighter jets to a US airbase as part of plans to provide aircraft to the Ukrainian armed forces. Well, the Pentagon said the prospect of flying combat aircraft from NATO territory into the war zone raises serious concerns for the entire NATO alliance. The UK Foreign Secretary will meet her US counterpart Antony Blinken in Washington later today to discuss what more the UK and America can do to support Ukraine. Ahead of the trip, Liz Truss declared the crisis a wake-up call for free democracies. Experts warn sanctions on Russian oil will further increase prices at the petrol pump here. The UK is phasing out Russian oil by the end of this year. It's feared that will put extra pressure on the cost of living. You're up to date here on GB News. We're on your TV, online and your DAB+ radio. Now let's head to The Briefing with Tom.
Good morning, it's 9:35 and this is The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, on your TV and your radio. Now, we're starting the programme with significant economic news, as yesterday the British government announced that by the end of this year, Russian oil imports will be banned from Britain. This is in tandem with an immediate ban on Russian oil and gas from the United States and an ambition from the European Union to do the same over the course of this decade. So what will be the economic consequences for us here at home? And what can be done to mitigate them? Well, Matthew Lesh is Head of Public Policy at the Institute of Economic Affairs and joins me now. Welcome to the programme, Matthew. First of all, I want to talk about global prices, because we've been told a lot about global prices over the last decade, yet global prices, to my mind, haven't been all that global. Let's take a look at this graph from The Economist magazine. Now, those listening on the radio can find it on the GB News social media accounts, but if we can show this graph now, it shows that over recent years, gas prices, I'm afraid we can't show the graph now, but I can describe it because it shows that East Asia prices have been soaring, prices in Britain have been soaring, in Europe they've been soaring, but prices have remained relatively flat in the United States. So what on earth is going on there? Matthew, could you explain what that phenomenon has been about?
Yeah, look, I think that's right to identify, Tom. The US has put a massive priority on security of supply, and they've done that by exploiting their massive reserves of shale gas through fracking. And that's meant that the US has a much cleaner supply of energy because they're less reliant on coal or dirty Russian gas or anything from overseas. And therefore, their prices haven't gone up anywhere near as much. What we're going to see as a result of both, I suppose, the sanctions on Russia as well as the embargo that's now coming into place is some quite substantial global impacts on our lives, particularly for energy-intensive industries, some of which might have to shut down. But I mean, the people talk about data as the new oil, but oil is the real, oil is still oil. Oil is an input into everything we buy, be it things we buy at the supermarket or packages on Amazon or whatever else it may be. The price of all that is going to go up because we don't have the same level of energy security that the United States has.
But what can be done in the short term about this? We've heard a lot about new drilling in the North Sea, potentially fracking in this country as well, or exploiting our British natural gas here at home. That's all going to take time. Is there anything that can be done in the short term?
Look, I think that's completely right. I mean, you do have to make and use the, I suppose, opportunity and what we're learning from this in order to make those medium to long-term decisions to get fracking in Britain so that we have our own domestic supply, so we're not so dependent on Russia or other unsavory countries. Also, obviously, using the natural resources in the North Sea. I mean, in the immediate term, what the UK can do, and this is more of a foreign policy task, is trying to put pressure onto OPEC to increase their supply. That's the classic cartel. They ideally should kick out Russia as well from that cartel so that there's a bigger incentive. There's also a lot of countries, of course, that aren't members of OPEC. You've got natural gas that you could ship in from Australia, from the US. Qatar recently left OPEC as well. So I think there's some opportunities there for the UK to work in its international networks to get a continued supply and try to bring down the global price. And that's really what the key will be in the short term, is using the existing global supply chains and increasing it. Because we've got these two pressures, of course. We're already seeing prices increase as a result of COVID-related disruptions. And now we've got this huge extra burden that comes from Russia and the conflict in Ukraine. You put those two things together, we're talking about extraordinarily high prices. Oil is 7 times higher than April 2020, and gas is 10 times higher. Now, I have faith that as the prices go up, more supply will come on board. OPEC, eventually the temptation gets too much in order to increase supply and prices come down as the global market responds to increased prices. So in a sense, you've got to play this along. Prices go up and down. That's the nature of this market, and let people respond. But at the same time, make the right policy decisions so that we have some energy security in the UK. The other point, which I don't think is made nearly enough,
is then
just the fact
a foreign policy issue more than a domestic energy issue, something that the Foreign Office needs to deal with more than the Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy Department. Well, the Foreign Secretary is meeting Antony Blinken, her US counterpart, today. Potentially that's part of that discussion. I'm afraid we've run to the end of the discussion there, Matthew Lesh, but thank you for joining us and talking through those issues with us this morning. Really important for people's pounds in their pockets. Now, yesterday, we saw a moving address from Ukrainian President Zelenskyy to the House of Commons. It was the first time a foreign leader addressed the chamber itself. In it, Zelenskyy evoked Churchill and Shakespeare, as has been well reported. Yet he also asked for help in the Ukrainian skies. Overnight, hope of the West providing fighter jets for Ukraine has dimmed, with the United States rejecting a complicated plane-swapping proposal from Poland. And NATO continues to not countenance the idea of a no-fly zone. So what can be done to help Ukraine in its hour of need? Well, joining me now is Bob Seeley, Conservative MP and member of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, who saw Zelenskyy's address yesterday. Bob, first of all, you heard that call from Zelenskyy to help in the skies. What's your response?
I think it was a very moving address, and I think he spoke very well and passionately. I'm not in favour of a MiG-29 swap. Because I think it moves us closer to direct escalation.
Now, just explain that for us there. This is about the aeroplanes that are sort of Soviet designed that Poland has, that Ukrainian pilots can fly, and they'd swap them around.
Yes. The Polish, as part of their legacy from the Warsaw Pact, have MiG-29s, which are multi-role but are often used for air superiority, and they've got some of those MiGs. The Ukrainian pilots, or some Ukrainian pilots, will be able to fly those MiGs because the Ukrainians are very familiar with the MiGs as well. So that we would effectively give them MiGs to tackle Russian air dominance over Ukraine. That's the idea, but I think there are two drawbacks with it. Firstly, if you have planes, you need air crew, you need ground crew, you need places to load the planes, you need runways, you need airfields, and with MiGs, you need ground control as well. Because they're complex and they rely on being able to talk to the ground all the time, is my understanding of how the MiG-29s work. So you need a whole infrastructure, which just gives the Russians potentially more targets. Secondly, it brings us much closer to direct conflict with NATO and Russia, which I think is something that we really have to guard against, because there are going to be a lot of emotional pressures on Western governments to act. And I think thirdly, you can achieve a lot of what you want to achieve with air denial by giving them anti-aircraft kit.
And so this anti-aircraft kit, why is that so different? Why does that not draw us closer to conflict? Ultimately, it's the West giving Ukraine resources, giving Ukraine military equipment, defensive as it might be. What's the sort of line in the sand here between surface-to-air missiles and aeroplanes?
Yeah. You're right. They're both kit. In both occasions, we are giving them kit. But the MiG-29s that we're giving them is far more symbolic. I think it has a much higher profile in terms of the symbolism. But also, I think just nudges us closer to a more direct involvement in this war. Anti-air and anti-tank kit is clearly defensive because you can't invade other countries with that. So I think it enables us to hold a line about selling non-offensive kit better, but also anti-aircraft kit can do the job just as well. And we've seen a lot of very effective fighting from the Ukrainians using modern anti-tank kit, especially when they're taking out the fuel trucks and the logistical all the stuff that you need for the logistical supply for all the armor you're bringing in.
That's really interesting. Now, I'm afraid we're running to the end of this conversation now, but in the last 30 seconds, what's your assessment of the chances of Ukrainian success? I think the odds seem to have swung more towards Ukraine in the last week than many people would have thought in the previous week.
I think in terms of politics, Ukraine has already won this war and Russia has already lost it. And I think Putin is on the way out. Whether that will take 5 weeks, 5 months or 15 years, who knows? But this is the end of his regime, and he's the last Soviet. The danger is the damage he will do on the way. And actually, the Ukrainians might, as well as winning the moral war, they might actually physically win the war on the ground as well, if the Russians can't supply their armor.
Still odds in favour of Russia, but ever growing in the favour of the Ukrainians, perhaps in terms of that short-term military conflict. Bob Seeley, thank you very much for your time this morning. We really appreciate it, talking through those incredibly important issues. But now to turn to more parochial affairs, perhaps, though no less important. Yesterday, a damning report into the conduct of John Bercow was released. The independent panel concluded that the former Speaker was a serial bully and a serial liar. Well, I'm delighted to be joined now by a former colleague of Mr. Bercow. Michael Fabricant is the Conservative MP for Lichfield and joins me now in the studio. Welcome to the programme, Michael. But firstly, before we get to our conversation, I want to take everyone back 8 years to 2014, when Clerk of the House Sir Robert Rogers, now Lord Lisvane, retired early as Clerk, stepping back from this hugely significant position in the House. To some, this was a mystery. To others, it was clearly the result of John Bercow's bullying. Now we've learnt that Sir Robert, or Lord Lisvane as he is now, was one of the key victims cited in yesterday's report. And I can't help noticing, Michael Fabricant, that you pointed this out in the House of Commons in 2014. Let's take a look.
Now, we don't know why he's chosen to retire early, though his working environment behind closed doors has not always been easy, as those in the know have already alluded. And in that respect, despite Sir Robert having studied Anglo-Saxon at Oxford and being told at least at once in front of others to off by you, Mr. Speaker, I think that wouldn't have encouraged him to stay.
I'll ignore the last observation, which suffered from the disadvantage of being wrong.
Wow, well, that was 8 years ago. So why has a formal report taken the best part of a decade to come out, Michael Fabricant?
I think because, as you saw there, Bercow is a serial liar. There were witnesses to the event. Sadly, you didn't have the bleep, you had a gap.
We had a gap. We took out an Anglo-Saxon word from that exchange.
Exactly. And this was just typical. This went on for 10 years. And in my view, it's not just John Bercow who has to answer to this, and it was 2 inquiries, by the way, who found him a serial liar and a serial bullier. And he's showing no remorse, by the way. I mean, he's now still saying they're all liars, they're all wrong, I was right, I wasn't a bully. It's extraordinary. But the people, I think, who also are very guilty is the House itself. Many people knew what was going on. And every time I raised it, I was bullied by Labour MPs who would shout and jeer and try and shout me down. Maybe because at the time he was supporting the Remainer point of view. I don't know why, but people were defending him. And I remember when I raised that issue in 2014, Margaret Beckett, who had been, or maybe she was at the time, I can't recall, leader of the House, came up to me and said I shouldn't have raised it. It was inappropriate. Well, there are a lot of shamefaced people now, I think, particularly on the Labour side, and 1 or 2 on the Conservative side too, who defended Bercow despite the evil goings-on.
So this was for matters of political expediency, of course. Bercow, as being Prince of Parliament, and particularly those Brexit years, that hung Parliament, he could grant as many amendments as he wanted to the opposition, not so many to those on the government benches. Potentially, this is people overlooking his acts for years, really.
Yes, so it wasn't
for political expediency.
Yes, it wasn't just bullying, it was bias. I mean, one of the first things that Lindsay Hoyle did when he became Speaker was to announce that if at any time I decide to take a course of action which is contrary to what the clerks say is the legal thing to do, according to the standing orders of the House, I will have to publish my reasons in the library so that people know what's gone on. And what had happened time and time again, where the clerks were saying to Bercow, look, you can't do this. This is actually out of order, as we say in the House of Commons. It's out of order. It's against the rules. And he would say, I'm doing what I'm doing.
I remember that particularly. I think it was in 2019, a specific incident where Bercow overruled his clerks to promote some Remainer amendment or other. But clearly this has been happening since before Brexit, as the battles with Lord Lisvane there that you were describing in the House of Commons in 2014 went on, forcing someone out of their job, their very, very senior job, before their time was extraordinary.
It was extraordinary, it was morally wrong, and as I say, I think the House of Commons was complicit in this because we did nothing about it. And this can't be allowed to happen again. You know, one of the ways the British Constitution is so good is it's flexible, it moves on, which the US Constitution can't do because it has a written constitution. But on the other hand, it means that there has to be responsibility by those who have power. And Bercow totally ignored that. I think there's something seriously wrong with him in many, many ways.
Wow, well, it's very, very worrying when you have a system that's based on convention. If people just choose to circumvent that convention, there's very little that can be done. Well, what an extraordinary period in our politics.
It is indeed, and I want it to be debated in the House, because I don't want this thing just to pass, because this could happen again, and we must learn by our mistakes. Both sides of the House have to accept some responsibility in not taking action. Though I have to say there were plenty of Conservative MPs who backed me and supported me, not only in the chamber but on social media, trying to expose him for the liar that he is.
Well, Michael Fabricant, you'll have to keep us informed of your progress raising this in the House. Thank you very much for joining us in the studio here today. Always appreciate your time, especially on these important issues. Now, turning today to today's big parliamentary event, although it may pale in comparison to yesterday's address by President Zelenskyy. It's Wednesday, so it's PMQs. Let's see what might be coming up now with John Rentoul, Chief Political Commentator at The Independent. Welcome to the programme, John. What can we expect from PMQs today?
Well, I think after yesterday's extraordinary and historic address from President Zelenskyy, I think we can see another show of unity between the two sides of the House. I don't think Keir Starmer is going to be criticising the Prime Minister in anything apart from detail. It'll be interesting to see whether he asks questions about the refugee issue. He steered clear of that last week, possibly because he's uncertain as to whether Labour wants to go all in on being more pro-refugee than the government as a long-term proposition. Because I mean, nobody knows how long this Ukraine war is going to last. But I think Priti Patel's evident incompetence over the past few days makes her too tempting a target.
If the political calculation has changed between last week and now, of course. In the meantime, we've seen front pages of newspapers with children being shelled, families shivering in the cold, a child starving in a city that had been shelled, and of course a YouGov poll that has come out showing around, I think it's over 70% support for taking in many, many Ukrainian refugees. Potentially, that swings the dial.
Yes, it may do, but I mean, public opinion is fickle on these things, and I think Keir Starmer might well be looking towards the longer term and not wanting to get too far out ahead of the government on this issue. I mean, these are difficult issues for the Labour Party because the pressure from his backbenchers obviously would be to go in fists flying, especially against Priti Patel. But she's doing quite a good job of damaging her own position, so I think he might be better advised to stick to bland statements of unity.
The classic never interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake, although it must be said the government might be making a mistake over refugees. Over everything else, it seems like they are doing some pretty world-leading stuff, whether it's the banning of oil or the action in the skies or what have you. I wonder if there's an economic argument to be made, though. While everyone supports banning that Russian oil, it's going to hit us in our pockets.
Absolutely, but that's another issue on which Keir Starmer doesn't want to get too far away from the government, because he doesn't want to be advocating putting up energy bills necessarily. So although yesterday, in his response to President Zelenskyy's address, he said that the Labour Party supported the toughest possible sanctions and wanting to cripple the Russian state, which I thought was a rather dramatic phrase. I don't think he's going to be putting much pressure today on the Prime Minister to further tighten the economic sanctions against Russia because of the costs that implies for British consumers. I mean, already we've seen energy prices. I mean, some of those rises are absolutely horrendous, and they're beginning to cut through. And the Labour Party does not want to be in the position of advocating even higher energy bills.
Certainly not. It will be fascinating to watch at midday today. John, thank you for running through those with us now. That's it for the conversation and indeed the programme. Up next, it's To the Point, but first, here's the weather.
Good morning. It's a windy day today with severe gales for a time towards the northwest, some heavy rain here, brighter and drier further east. However, with high pressure routed across Central Europe, any weather systems coming in from the Atlantic just grind to a halt across the UK at the moment, with some stronger winds covering much of the country. But this rain will be slow moving towards the northwest with some high rainfall totals through the day. So you can see where the rain is. Severe gales for a time associated with those heavy pulses, some damaging gusts across the western side of Scotland. Elsewhere, the cloud will break at times across England, even eastern Scotland, See some sunshine across eastern counties before the rain just nudges in across West Wales as well as the West Country, and it will persist across Northern Ireland as well as Western Scotland with snow over the higher ground above around 300 metres. Highest temperatures towards the southeast, 12 to 14 degrees Celsius, not feeling too bad if you can escape the wind. Now, through the evening and overnight, this rain nudges across towards northern counties of England. The Midlands seeing certainly some rain for the West Country as well as Wales, extending towards Aberdeenshire. It will turn colder towards the northwest of the country, so certainly for Northern Ireland and the northwest of Scotland, we'll see a frost here and some clearer skies to start the day across eastern counties of England. Even some sunshine as we head through Thursday. But this slow-moving weather front, where we've lost the intensity of the rain, still some patches of wet weather to come. Central parts of Scotland down towards the Midlands, even Wales, but some brighter skies emerging later towards the southwest, central southern England, seeing some brighter weather to end the day. Not as windy on Thursday, and temperatures still double figures away from the northwest. Not a bad day to be out and about if you can escape that clouds and rain across the central spine of the country. And here's your outlook through the latter part of the week. Turning windy yet again with some rain on Friday, showery bursts of rain with some gales towards the southwest as we head into the weekend. Bye-bye for now.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel. If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed.